This SoonerScoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX.
Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosovich. George Stoya here on a Monday, July 7th. We've made it to wedding week. There's also some breaking news coming down the pipe.
What a week.
Joe Castiglione retiring from Oklahoma after 28 years. We will get into kind of everything because this is an announcement that took obviously a lot of people by surprise on Monday morning. Before we get to that, though, let us tell you about our good friends over at Rhoback, RHOBACK.com. All you got to do, everybody knows about the Rhoback gear. You got it on today, George. Got the polo on, everyday shorts, the looper shorts that I've put into use out on the golf course here as of late, the Delta Performance pants. If you're thinking about the fall, all you got to do is go to Rhoback.com, promo code Sooner20 for 20% off. Thank you to our good friends over at Rhoback.com, always taking care of us here during the summer months, as I'm sure that you know if you've gone outside. But the big news of the day on Monday is the news that Joe Castiglione is going to step down as the University of Oklahoma athletic director at the end of 2026. We'll get into kind of the ins and outs. Joe Harris, University of Oklahoma president, put out a statement on Monday morning. But let's start here, George. You talked to Joe Castiglione down in Destin at the spring meetings just a couple weeks ago. Certainly a surprise that he's going to call it a career, a magnificent career at the end of the 2026 academic calendar.
Yeah, I think it's a surprise that this news dropped today, but I do think that this is something that's been coming, and it's been one of those questions that, you know, even I've asked Joe over the last couple of years of like, hey, how much longer do you want to do this? And I know down in Destin, he had kind of hinted at maybe this being his last go around, maybe, you know, this fall and, this last football season. And, you know, I think with the ever evolving, nature of college athletics right now, OU's move to the SEC, you know, Joe's 67 years old. Like you said, he's been the AD now at Oklahoma for 28 years. He was at Missouri before that. He's been doing this a long time.
It's crazy. I mean, he's been the athletic director for basically the entirety of my life. He was named the athletic director at Oklahoma in 1998. I was, 10 years old at the time. It's been a hell of a run. 26 national titles, 117 league titles. Obviously here as of the last year, taking Oklahoma from the Big 12 into the SEC. And like you said, it's a changing of the times right now in college athletics.
Yeah, and I think that you look at all the change that's happening in college athletics. You look at the changing happening at OU, hiring a football front office. You know, Randall Stephenson stepping in, hired by Joe Harris as I think his official title is the chair of football. And has had a lot of say in things going on in the athletic department in terms of cuts and things of that nature. I think Joe just, has said, look, like he obviously wants to be a part of this moving forward, and he will be. I know this year he's still going to serve as the AD until they hire a new AD, which, we can get into that in a little bit. But I think that for Joe, it was just time to be like, hey, I've done this for a long time. He's done a great job at it. Considered one of the best, if not the best, AD in the country for a long time. And I think he decided it was time for him to finally maybe take a step back.
Certainly, you look at the Twitter sphere on Monday morning, you see the Pete Thambles of the world who was responsible for the initial report out there that Joe Castiglione would be leaving the university at the end of the 2026 academic calendar. You look at Pat Forty, I know, put something out as well. Every national writer that covers college athletics as a whole, this is one of the best that's ever done it to a certain extent. Let's go to the statement now that was put out by the University of Oklahoma president, Joe Harris. Tomorrow morning, Vice President and Athletics Director Joe Castiglione will announce publicly that he has decided to retire on June 30th, 2028, a date that would be just over 30 years since joining the University of Oklahoma. This moment is not a farewell. Joe will continue to serve as athletics director into the coming year, and after that, he will assume the role of emeritus athletic director, advising on the search for his replacement and ongoing athletics projects, as well as continuing in fundraising capacity. A search for his replacement will be led by Randall Stephenson, which I think is fascinating, George, to point out here. And as you can see, the rest of the statement here, we will have a press conference on Tuesday morning over at the stadium with Joe Harris as well as Joe Castiglione, to hear from them. I guess if nothing more, just to hear it from the horse's mouth from Joe Castiglione. But it is interesting in this statement, it is put out that Randall Stephenson will be basically kind of the go-between or the head guy when you're looking for a new athletic director.
Which is fascinating because Randall's obviously a guy who comes from AT&T, was the chairman there and very business oriented. He has a pretty extensive sports background too at AT&T, partnerships and things of that nature with, major leagues and, professional sports. But like, what is the direction that he wants to go in? Because I think that when you think about Joe C leaving, everybody just assumes, oh, well, how about Zach Selman? He would step in and fill the role. Obviously served as Joe C's right-hand man for a long time here at Oklahoma. His name carries a lot of weight in the state, obviously. When you think back to, the Selman brothers and all of that, it would make a lot of sense. He's been at Mississippi State the last 2 years. But with Randall being the guy leading the charge, you wonder, does he take a different approach to this? There's been so much change in the athletic department in terms of the graphic of, who's in charge of what, Jim Nagy being in charge of, football operations, or Randall Stephenson has had a big hand in how they're handling NIL and the revenue sharing, which is going to be a big part of whoever they hire as athletic director. So, could he go to this business route where instead of maybe somebody that has an extensive background as an AD or in an athletic department like a Zach Selman, do they go a different direction and hire somebody from, professional sports or a marketing or a businessman from outside of sports? Like, I think that it's going to be very interesting because, I put out some potential candidates, and a lot of them are athletic department guys with backgrounds, working, their way up into being ADs or, right-hand mans for ADs. But I think that there's a very good chance, Eddie, that they look at people with an extensive background in finances. I think that there's a chance this thing is run more like a business than maybe an athletic department. And there's still certain aspects that you have to run it as like an athletic department. But Randall Stephenson being in charge here is just super interesting to me because it could go in several different directions.
I think over the last year and a half, especially with the failures on the football field over the last 3 seasons under Brent Venables, there was already a lot that was going to be put into this 2025 football season. And I think that for a lot of people, including maybe ourselves, people on the Crimson Corner, just in terms of the message board, there's a lot of questions about, was he forced out? Talking about Joe Castiglione. And I think that that's a question that, it's not crazy to ask that considering the elements that have been put in place. It was always going to be, rather important that they find success on the football field. But it's to our understanding, that's probably not the way that this would be termed.
No, he wasn't forced out. But I do think that, with all of the changes that have happened over the last year in the athletic department, I do think that Joe C's role has somewhat changed as the athletic director. Maybe he didn't have as much say, or there were more voices in terms of things. Now, I will say he was an integral part of hiring Ben Arbuckle. That was something that he did alongside Brent Venables. He helped with this search for a general manager and Jim Nagy. I know that he and Randall Stephenson, as well as Joe Harris, worked very closely together on that search for a GM. The front office model was Joe Castiglione's idea several years ago, so he had a huge hand in that. So he still had a huge hand in a lot of things, but I do think that, somewhat over the last year or so, the role has changed, not just for Joe C. I think it's changed at other athletic departments, and maybe that played a role in Joe deciding to retire, but I think it's all of it, Eddie. I think it's all of it combined, whether it's the changing of people inside their own athletic department or the changing nature of all of college athletics. He's been in this business for, nearly 50 years now, and it's changed so much, and especially now, it's certainly not what it used to be. And I think that he looks at it and says, look, I'm 67. He's got other things he wants to do in his life, I'm sure, in retirement. Now, I think he'll still have a hand these next few years, obviously, in the athletic department in terms of helping guide whoever the next person is. And maybe that's why they want to keep him on, right? For the next few years is whoever they hire, maybe they don't have a ton of AD experience like a Zach Selman, right? Like he doesn't have a ton. And so that's somebody that, somebody like Zach could maybe lean on, or somebody else that they hire. It would make a lot of sense.
For so many years, going back to even when Bob Stoops was the head coach, you always talked about and you always heard about that trio, or the three-headed monster that was David Boren, Bob Stoops, and Joe Castiglione. Just kind of crazy to realize that, as of, I guess, April of 2026 or beyond, June of 2026, if you will, it will be no more. And he'll move into that emeritus role. That has been a question that a lot of people have asked about since the statement was put out by Joe Harris. End of academic calendar is when he would move into the emeritus role. So for people that see the 2028 number next to Joe Castiglione's name, yes, he would still be on, but he will not be the athletic director after 2026.
Correct. And if they say they hire an AD in the next few months, would he move into that role earlier? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they hire somebody and it's just the AD in waiting. That could be the situation. And maybe they hire somebody internally. I don't know. I know Marcus Bowman, he's been thrown around as a name inside the building that could be a potential candidate as well. I do think it'll probably be an outside hire. Maybe somebody with some OU connections. Like I said, Zach Selman, obviously, Ren Baker at West Virginia has a lot of Oklahoma State ties. So maybe he's a candidate that could be thrown out there. I know I listed several on Soonerscoop.com that you can check out that have some OU or Oklahoma ties in general. So
Michael Alford, another name that
Florida
worked
State
within the athletic department, something that Pete Thamlin, you put it in your story as well. Under Joe Castiglione, we talked about it, the last 50 years and predominantly the last, we'll say 35, 40 years as the athletic director at Missouri or Oklahoma. 32 different persons have worked under him to move on to a commissioner role and or another athletic director role of their own.
It's impressive. I mean, he's had a lot of people come through that have gone on to do great things in college athletics, and that's why you have a wide range of candidates that you could go after, whether it be one of those 32 or somebody like I said on the outside. And that's why it's fascinating that they came out. Joe Harris came out and said, "Hey, Randall Stephenson's the one leading this charge." I don't know, Eddie. It's definitely a changing of the times at Oklahoma right now, and we've seen that over the last really year. Ever since Curtis Lofton a year ago was named the GM of OU football, he's since left. They hired Randall Stephenson to come in, and basically he's doing it for free to come up with Oklahoma's plan for revenue sharing. Joe Harris has now been the president for just a few years. And so it's going to be interesting. And I'll tell you, Eddie, this new AD, whoever it is, could end up making a monumental hire for Oklahoma. If things don't go well this season for OU football, do they move on from Brent Venables? And whose decision is that? Is it Joe Castiglione, who could still be the AD at that time, which, maybe he probably still will be, but maybe they have an AD in waiting. How much say do they have in that? Jim Nagy, I think, will have a huge say in all of football operations going forward. Randall Stephenson obviously has a lot of say in things. Joe Harris is pulling strings. So board of regents, what say do they have in that? I think it's all very interesting. And I think something that I hope we get clarified a little bit tomorrow is just what is the hierarchy, moving forward. If you hire an AD, do they make the hires? Like or does Jim Nagy, the general manager, is he making the hire?
Specifically about football.
Yeah, for football. Because obviously the new AD will make hires for all the other sports, you would assume, including, men's basketball and things like that. But, is Jim Nagy the one that's going to make the hire for football if they have to? I think that the answer tomorrow would be, hey, we don't plan on making a new hire.
Right.
We're backing Brent 100%. But it's an interesting hypothetical because the next 6 months could be monumental for OU football.
Not to mention all the tentacles that come with this and the hires that Joe C. has made outside of the football realm. Jenny Baranczyk being one of those.
Think of the relationships that he's built with a lot of these coaches. Jenny Baranczyk, she's had multiple people come after her for different jobs, and she stayed because of her relationship with Joe C. And obviously they've paid her good money, but I think that's been a huge part. I think Porter Moser obviously is a name that's come up a lot. He's got a very good relationship with Joe C. KJ Kindler, women's gymnastics, I think has stuck around a long time. Patty Gasso, she's very close with Joe C. Does Patty look at this after next season and say, hey, maybe it's time for me to hang it up? I don't know. I think all of those relationships are very interesting, including the ones in that athletic department. You've got a lot of people in that athletic department that have worked for Joe C, are loyal to Joe C, and have been for some time. You think of people like a Larry Nafee, who's been around forever as his right-hand man. Greg Tipton, who's been a huge help. What are their thoughts on all this? Marcus Bowman, I mentioned.
Sure.
I think all of them, it's very interesting to see how all of this could play out.
In the grand scheme of things, and I think if you're watching this here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, you're probably screaming at your television or your computer as we ask this, but Oklahoma is still a very, very good athletic program, correct? This is still a job that there will be a number of suitors out there.
100%. And, I caught some slack on Sooner Scoop saying, they need to go after the top 80s in the country. Well, the reality is they're not going to get, a Chris Del Conte from Texas, which, why would he leave Texas right now? I don't think they're going to get Greg Byrne from Alabama or anybody like that. But I do think that there's a lot of candidates out there, Eddie, that you could go and poach. I think Ren Baker from West Virginia, like I mentioned, he would make a lot of sense. Travis Goff at Kansas. He's somebody that's a young guy that I think's done a really nice job at Kansas the last few years. Now, he's a KU grad, so would he want to leave Kansas? I don't know. Kirby Holtcutt. I don't think he would leave Texas Tech. Texas Tech's got a lot of momentum right now, but he worked for Joe C. That was his first gig.
Some interesting names when you're throwing out somebody like a Kirby Holtcutt. I didn't realize he played football with Brent Venables at Kansas State. Not to say that that's going to go into any type of consideration. Obviously, you would have to throw out there, too, with the Felix Ojo news over the weekend. I think it's been very well explained. Add in Nigel Kennedy as well with what the donor situation looks like in Lubbock right now, which seems to be a very comfortable situation for an athletic director. There's so many tentacles that go into all of this in the hire of what ultimately will be a new athletic director for Oklahoma for the first time in 29 years.
And I think that it's really important to understand that this next athletic director, it could look totally different than anything that we've seen at Oklahoma, and obviously in a long time because Joe C has been doing it for 28 years. But I just wonder, there's some people are saying, they need to go out and get somebody with a ton of athletic director, experience or SEC experience. I just wonder if the new position in what Oklahoma wants to do, is it somebody that has more of a business background than an athletics background? I don't know.
Considering all the house settlement stuff, the revenue sharing that is to come for college athletics.
And I think it's somebody, Eddie, too, maybe the number one thing is fundraising experience. Can they get money? Because I think that's one thing that Oklahoma, if you want to be critical about OU in the last few years, it's I think they've fallen short at times at raising enough money to compete at a high level. And now I think that they're in a good spot right now. I think that they've obviously received a lot of donations over the last year, but they need whoever to come in here, be able to do a really good job of getting money from fans, selling tickets, not only to football, but other sports as well, and continuing to have a good foundation in terms of monetary value for the athletic department, because that ultimately is how you're going to succeed in this new world of college athletics.
Not to mention that you could be inheriting a situation with the proposal to build a new basketball arena. I know the baseball folks still want their new facilities over at
Football
L.
renovations.
Mitchell. Football renovations, a possible renovation to come on the west side of the stadium with the new press box. There's a lot of things that a new athletic director is going to be inheriting.
Yeah, and that's why it's fascinating. Do they go with somebody with more business experience, somebody that, two guys that I think would make a lot of sense that don't have any athletic director experience is Ryan Alpert at Tennessee. He's the, I think, director of finances there at Tennessee, right-hand man to Danny White. He's done a phenomenal job the last few years at Tennessee, raising money and getting a lot of different projects done. And then the other one is Kevin White at Clemson. He's somebody that
you kind of took a keen eye to,
yes,
right?
I think looking at his resume, the job he's done at Clemson, he's been there for the last 3 years. He oversees their NIL programming as well as broadcasting and things like that. He works directly with Dabo Swinney. He's been the right-hand man now there for, I think, 3 years. And then before that, he was at Northwestern and oversaw a huge budget there. So I think that he's somebody, when you look at his background in terms of handling finances and raising money, I think would be a pretty good fit if that's what they're looking for.
So again, Joe Castiglione will step down as Oklahoma's athletic director for a spot that he has been in for the last 28 years, which is, I think from a personal level, it's still kind of incredible to think that this is something that we've always kind of we've talked about on road trips. We've talked about in the office here at Suitor Scoop, just like what would that look like when Joe C finally decides to hang it up? And now that the day's here, it's kind of like, oh, okay, shit. This is really happening.
Yeah, and I think that I know there's a lot of. It's funny because you look at the way that national media and national fans react to the news and say, "Man, Joe C was one of the best to ever do it." He was fantastic at Oklahoma. Hat tip, all that things. And then you look at some of the responses from OU fans are like, "It's about time," and things. But I do think that Joe C deserves credit for the job he's done at OU. I mean, you look at the success that they've had, on the field and in courts and all of that over the years. Like you mentioned earlier, 26 national titles, 117 conference titles. I mean, it's been remarkable success. And yes, there's been some shortcomings, right? The Lloyd Noble Center, trying to figure out a plan for that. That is something that, Joe C never really got done. And maybe they get it done with this new arena plan, but long overdue. I think fundraising and NIL and those sorts of things, while difficult, maybe Oklahoma's fallen short there over the last few years. I do think that they're on the right track now, but I think overall, Joe C is going to go down as an OU legend. I mean, the job that he's done. I mean, he hired. Think of all the coaches that he's hired.
Oh, sure.
In his 28 years. I mean, Bob Stoops, the winningest coach in OU football history. I don't think he hired Patty Gasso, but kept her around all these years. Built softball into what they are.
The softball program. Obviously it took some time, but you got Lowe's Field, one of the majestical places in college softball, if you will.
Yeah.
Good stat from Jeremy Poplin up in Tulsa, our buddy. Joe C, the athletic department budget went from $24 million in 1997. Now on his way out, it'll be over $200 million.
Crazy.
Obviously, that's changing with the times and everything that goes into that. But you're right. Like over the course of the 28 years, you could look at a number of the athletic departments outside of football, obviously. And Oklahoma, I think football has had a pretty good run, all things considered.
Yep.
It's been a pretty damn good athletic program.
I mean, it's been a top 10 athletic program for the last 20-some years in just about every single category. I mean, you look at the revenue numbers, and they're in the top 10. They're one of the only self-sustaining athletic departments in the country. So,
which I think a lot of fans would go, who gives an F? But at the same time, that's what his job is.
Exactly. And they don't take any money from the university. In fact, they've given a lot of money to the university, that was generated through athletics. So I think that he's done obviously a tremendous job. And now turning the page, Eddie, it's going to be fascinating how this plays out and what this role looks like moving forward.
And hopefully we'll know a little bit more about the ins and outs of what actually is going to go down over this next year and a half with Joe C, ending his run, and then obviously the new hire led by Randall Stephenson. And we will talk to Joe Castiglione as well as Joe Harris, University of Oklahoma president, on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Continued coverage here on the SuitorScoop.com YouTube channel. We'll fire up a unofficial 40. Kerry Murdoch will join us on Tuesday after we hear from Joe Harris and Joe Castiglione as well to give his thoughts on the news on Monday. Joe Castiglione stepping down after 28 years at the University of Oklahoma. George, happy wedding week.
Thank you.
This is it's only the big news that we've been waiting on for the last, it seems like 20 years or something.
Gives me something to do other than stress out about the wedding all
Break
week.
up the monotony of the week. There you go. All right, for George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you back here on the SuitorScoop.com YouTube channel.